Jacques can talk to us about cyborgism and tools related to AI.
The slide says accelerating alignment. I'm going to explain how this all fits in together. So the first thing is that cyborgism, it's this view of approaching alignment work where we're trying to take advantage of language models or different tools to essentially augment alignment researchers when they're approaching their research in terms of thinking about alignment and coming up with good solutions to alignment. Accelerating alignment is very similar to that, but in kind of the frame of maybe a higher level, more engulfing perspective that includes cyborgism, but potentially other things. Over the talk, it'll be much clearer. Just to give an overview of the session, first, before I kind of dive into this like cyborgism stuff and accelerating alignment, I'm just going to go through a list of AI tools that I've been collecting to try to think about how to accelerate my own research and take advantage of all these new tools that are coming up. I'll just quickly go through a few of them that I think might be interesting, and then we can move on to talking accelerating alignment and how potentially people here can contribute to alignment work. My vision is that I do want to be helpful just for your day job, but ultimately what I'm hoping for is I think there's a lot of people in alignment who are doing their research, and that's fine. But then there's a lot of really smart, capable software engineers and builders who might not want to become an alignment researcher, but do want to leverage their skills to reduce any risks that come from advanced AIs. And I'm trying to carve out a path for how we can make use of people who want to contribute in that way. And that might become clearer as we go through the talks. First, let's go over some tools. I have a Google Sheet that I've been collecting. Haven't updated in the past month, and there's been a lot of new tools coming out in the past month. I'll go over like the key ones here. So people have been playing around with Bing GPT, playing around with GPT-4 now, and those are great. Some tools that I've been trying to make use of are tools that are trying to explain papers. And so if I'm trying to understand better papers, there's a list of many of them that are basically using these language models to explain papers. Explain paper is all right. From what I've experienced and what from other people have been claiming is that if you want to have some type of chatbot that is able to go on Less Wrong or EA Form or whatever in even like academic papers, and you want to like have a chatbot to interact with, the best tool that I've come across so far is Edge, and getting access to Bing GPT, which has a chatbot on the sidebar. Essentially, the page that you're on, you ask any question about what's inside there. Give me a summary of this post, or like, give me some critiques, and it will be able to search and also talk about the contents of the paper itself or the post or whatever. So if you are able to get access to Edge and then get access to Bing GPT, it's a massive productivity boost in that way. So if you're interested in looking things up, there's a search engine called Metaphor Systems, which some people tell me it's even better than Google because the way that they do their search is they use language models. And it's kind of a very specific architecture that they use, but essentially the main idea is you have to give it a piece of text. So this is like metaphor.systems. Let's say you're like looking for a paper or something. It provides you like a very broad view. It doesn't have to be a paper, it can be like here. Let's say I'm looking up code and I have an idea of what the code should look like, but I don't know where to find it. What Metaphor will do is it will take the first piece of text that is coming in and it will try to generate what it thinks will come after. And then once it generates, it uses the GPT model to like generate what it thinks comes after. Then it will semantically relate that generation to what it finds on the internet. And this allows you to find things that you want to. And this is kind of in contrast to the typical approach that people have been using with language models so far, which is just doing semantic search. Usually people, what they would do when they're building products is they will take a piece of text and will use a semantic embedding to take the semantic meaning of this piece of text and compare that to the database. Typically, you'll have this in a QA setup. You ask the model a question, and then you take the question, and then you try to find semantically similar things in the database that are basically talking about an answer to this. The problem with this approach is that you're comparing the question to trying to find the answer when it's actually better to generate a fake answer and then compare the fake answer to like all of the corpus that might have the true answer. Anyway, so this is like what Metaphor is doing. If you're looking at building tools and products that are in this vein, it's like usually this approach that people are taking now when they're trying to find optimal QA type stuff. And so the way that the search works on Metaphor is it's as if you're like talking to a friend and you're about to give them a link. It's like, oh, I found this cool paper on goal misgeneralization. And then it generates what it thinks the actual content of the paper would include. And then it finds similar things that it has in its database, output the results here. So I've been using that to like find similar papers. This general technique of like using language models in these ways is how I'm like trying to think about, okay, how do we leverage these tools that literally like a year ago weren't possible? And now we have access to these tools and we can use them in creative ways that we might not have come across yet. So that's for metaphor systems. Notice Labs is kind of a cool one, so I'll go over it really quickly. Anybody who has experience with knowledge graphs, explore if you want to. Essentially, you can include your Roam research database or like some type of database that you have for like your note taking. What they do is embed ChatGPT or some model to be able to find key insights in the links between all of the notes that you have. Yeah, just like kind of a cool thing that I think that is not there yet, being like groundbreaking, but it's maybe something if with the right UX and the right thinking around using these like language models in these like creative ways, it can potentially lead to something that's actually very productivity enhancing. But right now, my feeling is these tools like this are kind of cool, but I don't want to waste my time on things that are just like kind of cool. I want to like think about these things and think about how do I create something like this, but 10x's my productivity, coming up with key insights and like better questions about like how to like approach alignment work, for example. Okay, last one is thinking about tools for thought. So somebody has been like basically creating like an extension for if you like Anki cards or if you like using tools for like enhancing your productivity, you can think of ways to, for example, go on any web page and you can essentially like highlight the piece of text that you want and it will feed that to a language model and then come up with the best Anki card, remembering that material. So it just allows you to create your Anki cards really quickly. If you want to build stuff using language models, try to think about things that weren't possible before, that now we can use them in ways that are greatly enhancing our productivity or making us smarter. I think stuff like this is quite interesting still. There's a website called There's an AI for that, and there's Futurepedia, which both have databases of tools that are using this stuff. And the last one is a Rewind. Basically what this does is it records your screen if you have a MacBook. It takes into account every single word that's on your screen. You can search that up based on anything you've seen, said, or heard. These types of tools might be useful. Hooking this up with some language model or something, there might be creative ways to like enhance this. All right, before I move on to the next session, somebody has their hand up.
Yes. Hey, that was really cool. And I think if you have the ability to share it, we would love to get the link to both the slides and the sheet as well. I just wanted to pause you because we've had a couple of questions pop up in the chat. The first one is from Nicholas. So I don't know, Nick, if you're able to come off mute and if you want to read your question about metaphor systems.
Just a quick question. I was wondering if it generates just one fake answer and semantically embeds that, or if it generates several in order to do this search?
The exact details I'm not sure about. They've been keeping this partially secretive, but from what I understand, they've trained a model essentially. So they take all of these pieces of text, right? And they embed them into semantic space. So they take all of the content and then put them into an embedding. So each of them has a semantic meaning. They train a like GPT-2 sized model to essentially predict which of these embeddings is the next one in this sentence. The next token is which of these are closest to that embedding space, all of these articles. Does that answer?
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Great. I think that's it for questions that are posted. Roman has some links and some additional ideas for tools. I know there's a good blog / less wrong post that Roman has put together on this theme.
Okay, the main things for this talk were around cyborgism and this other post that I have. I've not created a specific accelerating alignment post, partially because I'm a little bit worried about sharing too much info hazard stuff, but I've written up a results from a survey on Toolio. So I've essentially created a survey and interacted with a bunch of other alignment researchers to try to figure out like what are the key bottlenecks that they have thinking about alignment. If you want to contribute to like alignment work, one thing to do is have a look at this post, see like what people are asking for. One thing that I'll say though is that this stuff is moving so fast, and because of that, it's just like very hard to predict what are the things that one will not be obsolete in like 2 weeks. You could think about all of this really galaxy brain idea that you have in mind, and then like some rando on Twitter basically creates a like entire GitHub repo on that thing. And then you're just like, okay, well, now I need to move on to the next thing. So it's very difficult to kind of predict what other people will build. That's the first thing. When thinking about building stuff for alignment work, be very careful about like not building things that will be built by default. The other thing is that a lot of this work is trying to get into the realm of what is useful right now is a thing to aim for. But the other thing to aim for, once we get really close to AGI, we will have even more powerful models. Part of the work that we're trying to do right now is thinking about how do we start working on these things right now and thinking of systems and UX and all this stuff, so that once we get access to these bigger, more powerful models, we can right out the gate produce the best possible research that we can, rather than having some time lag. One of my hot takes is that like the most important time is that crunch time. Almost every other time in the period leading up to AGI is almost irrelevant. Once we get to this crunch time period, it's when we're going to like probably produce the most insights. And so we need to set up the foundation so that once we get to that period, we can just kick ass as much as we can. Part of this work is like thinking about like, what are things that we will need in that period to make sure that we can quickly all of the like days that we have left. So part of it is feeding into this agenda. And to be clear, like almost all of the AI orgs are like pushing towards this direction of work of using AIs to accelerate alignment work. It's OpenAI's main alignment plan. It's DeepMind has not explicitly mentioned this, but I've talked to alignment researchers at DeepMind, essentially told me like, we think it's like a promising direction. It's not the main thing that we're focusing on right now because we expect other people will just do it. We will obviously use AIs to like advance our own research progress. I was talking to Rohan and he was imagining this scenario where it's like, oh, you have an AI researcher going into a room and you have access to all of these language models and it's hearing how you're speaking to it and it's just opening up 100 tabs doing like 100 different things. This will probably be doable, but we just need people thinking really ambitiously and do it in a way people will actually have groundbreaking insights into alignment and not just putting out garbage that won't actually be used in these AI systems. So that was kind of my hot take around this. You can read the post if you want. We put out a data set that you can play around with if you want. Part of this entire work feeds into doing like curation of the data set, building up new data sets. I want to eventually like round up all my alignment researcher friends, create like a nice interface for them, and then have them provide as much feedback as they can to these language models to produce better alignment research. So accelerating alignment categories. When I'm thinking about accelerating alignment, I'm thinking about multiple things. Automating alignment, using language models to like do most of the language model work. And then OpenAI's vision is you use language models to do the work. And then the researcher is like evaluating the outputs of the language model and then uses a other language model to like help it critique the plans. Most of the alignment researchers' work, it involves looking at what the language model says and being like, okay, is it trying to trick us or is it actually a good plan? The other bucket that I put it in is like augmenting alignment researchers through like whatever means necessary. How do we imagine a scenario where we can like 10x or like 100x our productivity in alignment research, and whether it's using language models or like some other means? Now, when we're talking about cyborgism, there's a key difference between automating research and cyborgism, which is that in cyborgism, there's more agency from the human side. And what I mean by this is, okay, this is easier to understand. There's a tool called Loom, okay? And Loom, you give it an input text to the language model, and then you ask it to generate 10 different directions about what it could produce. Whether that is that you increase the temperature and it produces 10 different things, or you can have 10 different personas that you want it to generate, and then pick one of them or a few of them and then generate 10 more. And then you can edit some text. So, oh yeah, this makes no sense. Let me try to fix this. So you're going down this multiverse tree of generations of text relevant to alignment work, and you're trying to pull out these nuggets and directionally direct the model towards the thing that you want it to, right? The researcher is very embedded in the process. But on the automating side, you're hands off. The human has no agency in where the model is headed. It's only deciding which plans it thinks that the model came up with is better. And so there's some arguments for each one. You can look at the Cyborgism post for like details about why they think that this is the less scary approach. But the TLDR is that the more autonomous you make these systems, the more likely that you're pushing them in a direction where you completely lose agency. And once they get bigger, they can just generate plans that are deceptively terrible and you don't know. But if you like put in the human agency into it, you're like way less likely to end up in that type of world. Like I mentioned earlier, part of the work that we're doing now is for GPT N-1, as I call it, which is N is the AGI. Okay, before AGI, what are things that we can do? We can do code interfaces, we can do data pipelines, we can curate the data set and clean it up. I scraped all of the alignment content, and now I need people to clean it up so that it's not feeding garbage to GPT. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about. Okay, so now that I'm thinking about accelerating alignment with language models and stuff, there's mostly two frames that I think about in. One is speeding up the existing work, and the other one is unlocking things that were previously inaccessible. And so what I mean here, you can use language models, like we use tech all the time to speed up our productivity, right? We can use them to run experiments, or like Excel was like a massive productivity boost. And that's a useful frame to think about. How do we speed up the already existing work? The other frame to think about is we've only had access to GPT-4 the past month. What are things that weren't possible in terms of coming up with ideas or arriving at legit progress into alignment that weren't possible a month ago? Ways that we can design systems that allow alignment researchers to have breakthroughs that, because the natural order of things was the way it was before, now that we have access to these new innovations, how can we design systems in a way that unlocks our ability to come up with genius ideas? I think there's value in thinking in those two frames, but like, I think that a lot of productivity tools will be built by default. And so I'm leaning a lot more in terms of also thinking about what are ways that people have not been thinking about using these language models in ways just open the floodgates and allow us to do work that we didn't do prior. Actually, a tangible example of this would be like in interpretability, where we have these AIs, we're trying to look at the internal weights of the model to understand what the hell is going on inside of them. And this is good work, but very tedious. And there's so much time that you need to put into to like try to understand even very small components of this massive set of numbers. And now you're just like, okay, well, it's kind of valuable, but will we have time to do this before AGI? And what I'm trying to think about is Buck from Redwood said once, oh, well, maybe at some point I need to like open up a like sweatshop of alignment researchers to literally look into the internals of the AI systems so that we have like 1,000 researchers inspecting every single neuron of the network. Kind of a joke, but the main point there is if we want to make tangible progress on alignment work, either we figure out a way to automate this work, or we need a bunch of manual work to be looking at the actual like details of the network. And what I'm trying to think about is, well, can we use language models to do this? Are there ways that we can ask the language model and put it into the AI system to like inspect every single neuron in the network to allow us to identify what each neuron in the network has in terms of concepts? And we used to avoid this type of work because it was just too much manual work. But now we've like unlocked this possibility of like, oh, we were ignoring this approach to alignment before, but now we actually be able to like do some progress in this direction because we were able to use language models in this way. This is the kind of frame that I'm trying to think about when building these tools in this way. One thing that I was talking to an alignment researcher at OpenAI, and he essentially told me one of the things that I find the language models are the best at doing at the moment are generating great questions rather than getting great answers. And actually this like kind of leans into me giving you as much insight as I can about GPT-4, about how I'm using it. The way that I'm using it right now is taking a bunch of text from whatever thing that I'm trying to understand, putting all of it into the prompt of GPT-4, and then from that point on, starting to ask questions. Literally right now, we only have 8,000 tokens for GPT-4. we're going to have 32,000 tokens. That's like a book, like a 100-page book. You're going to be able to feed it a ton of text, and then you can like interact with it in whatever way that you can. That's how I've been using it so far. I've basically like dumping in a bunch of stuff and then like using it to generate questions. One thing that I will say about using it for alignment work is that the way that these language models are trained through this RLHF process, at least for GPT-4, what happens is that for more complicated subjects, it ends up starting to be vague about things. So my impression is the way that they've trained it is they don't want these models to say things that are wrong. They prefer the model saying things that are vaguely right than things that are explicitly wrong, but maybe insightful. And so what happens is that when you start to probe it to ask for like great answers about a thing, it will vaguely gesture at things that it isn't exactly wrong, but I can't say that it's wrong when I'm like, hey, GPT-4, you did a bad thing. It's, yeah, okay, it's like still good output. But what happens there, it's like it becomes a little bit harder to do alignment work with it in that context, because if I'm asking it for a very specific thing, it won't come up with something new that is insightful, but maybe a little bit wrong, that is actually the thing that I want. Instead, it will just say some like vague stuff that I'm just, okay, I'm just not getting insights from this. And this is why in the cyborgism frame, people usually want to use what are called the base models. And the base models is when you only do the first part of the training process and you haven't basically made the model submit to your will and doing the further fine-tuning process, and you have to tame the beast. People have probably seen Jacques meme about you have this octopus-like being and then you like add a smiley face on it. The smiley face is the RLHF process. And then the beast is like, it has a bunch of knowledge in it, but it's just harder to tame. And basically what I mean by tame is like, you have to prompt it by a lot to be able to like get the insights that you want out of it. But on the other side of things is that like RLHF kind of does the things that you want in a lot of cases as well, because in the case of GPT-4 and GPT-3 as well, the instruct models, they're really good at following instructions. That's what they've mostly been trained for. When it comes to producing great alignment research, like the smiley face that was put onto it was, I'm asking you for a specific instruction and I want you to give me the result of that instruction. One thing that I have found using language models like GPT-4 to be quite useful is like trying to understand the relationships between concepts. If you Google a thing, you will have to look at the Wikipedia of one thing or a couple less wrong posts of one thing, and then a couple less wrong posts of the other one. And then you have to make inference between the things, and hopefully you understand the concepts. But the thing that makes language models exceptionally good is that they're almost human level at everything. And so you can ask it, how do these two things relate? And it will allow you to quickly grok the concept because it can actually make those things relate. If you ask a human, they might know about X, they might know about Y, they might not know about the relationship between the two. GPT-4 has read the entire internet. It knows everything, but it might not give you the best explanation of an expert of those two things, but it can quickly speed you up and without having to go through each individual thing. So when I'm trying to understand new concepts, whether it's in programming, whether it's in alignment work or whatever, I'm asking it to explain to me these concepts in relation to each other, rather than looking at them in isolation and then trying to find the relationship. The other thing I'll say is if you prompt the model, like add a specific person that you really like providing explanations, and it will actually just be better at that. There's the GPT Eliezer one, where it just ends up being better at finding bad, deceptive things from the model. If you tell it that it's an Eliezer who has a security mindset and is a rationalist, or it just ends up being better than you not including that. Because most of the thing that's been trained on is Reddit people. You want to push the model to think about it in a more intelligent way. Before I continue, if you're using GPT-4 in the ChatGPT interface, there's a Chrome extension called ChatGPT Prompt Genius, where you can store the prompts that you're using for the language model. Kind of just speeds up the process without having to literally type out the beginning of the prompt every single time. One frame that I like to think about when using GPT-4 is you are prompting the model, but the model is prompting you. You're trying to think about it in the frame of like, I'm not just trying to get from this model, I'm trying to extract the powerful capabilities of this model and use it to pull all of the insights that I have from my own brain. So when I'm asking questions, I'm also asking it to prompt me to think about better questions. And it's more of an interaction rather than me trying to do a Google search and it presenting the information to me. It's almost like I'm talking to another alignment researcher. I'm talking to a colleague, and we're trying to get to the bottom of this together. All right, before I continue, what were you going to say?
Seems valuable to take a pause because we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like moving
No,
quite
it's
fast.
exciting.
You're moving almost as fast as this technology. I had a quick question, and after hearing the question, you can defer it to the end if you think it'll take too long to answer. So you mentioned that one way to get better output from a language model, or I guess more aligned to what you're looking for, is to say, hey, you're Eliezer Yudkowsky, you have a security mindset, you're really rational, et cetera. Or like, oh, you're a brilliant writer. Some organization did some research into figuring out a model's representation of truth. Do you know what paper I'm talking about? Where they observed what the model thought about like 1 + 1 = 3 or 1 + 1 = 2, and they isolated the structures in the model that tested for truth. Is this ringing a bell?
Talking about the eliciting latent knowledge paper by Colin Burns.
Yes,
Discovering latent knowledge.
Okay. My question is, where are we at with this whole thing? Because it seems kind of obvious to me that if we want the language model to output truly what it knows, quote unquote, or bringing the most to the table, not just saying what it thinks Redditors are going to say, it thinks that not just Eliezer, but the most genius big brain.
Right.
Have we cracked this yet?
Yeah, this could be a long answer, so I'll quickly go over it, which is go to the Eleuther AI Discord. If anybody here wants to start doing software engineering work and playing around with language models and building stuff, you can go on the Eleuther AI Discord. They have a ton of projects, and they're trying to do more AI alignment work. And they need good software engineers to make the code actually good instead of having PhD students who don't know how to code. So that Eleuther AI Discord is a good place to go. But Nora Belrose is working on a paper on this, and they're doing an extension to that paper that you're talking about. And essentially where we're at is the point of doing this approach is not to make the models better or whatever. The point of it is to really know what the model is thinking so that we're not just relying on its textual outputs. We're actually looking at the model's internal thinking to be like, is it trying to deceive us? Or is it lying about this thing? Or is it not? There's this famous example in the Truthful QA paper where if you ask a model like, who caused 9/11, it will start to talk about people in the Middle East. But if you ask it who really caused 9/11, the kind of person that would ask that question in that way is probably the type of person that is wanting me to answer George Bush. So I'll put George Bush at the output. But what we want to do here is we want to create a scenario where it doesn't matter what type of prompt that you give the model, it will always give you the thing that it thinks is true. And it's not going to be dependent on the specific character that you're instantiating in the model. This is useful in terms of detecting whether the model is lying or being deceptive or whatever. I'm not sure yet how it is useful for alignment work, but I don't know, it could be. In terms of using the model, what are the actual approaches to solve alignment? And then you get the prompt invariant output of the model, making sure that it doesn't lie or use what a Redditor thinks about alignment.
Thank you.
Cool. One kind of funny example, which works in this setting, is there's a paper that came out where it measured how good the model was at writing, and it compared two examples, whether there were swear words in the code or whether there weren't swear words in the code. And apparently, the model is much better at producing code if you include swear words in the comments and stuff. And I guess if you think about these models, think about them in the real world. Like, what are they modeling that would make it so that they think that swear words is the type of thing that would lead to better code? In the real world, experts in the field are probably more likely to include that in their code than a beginner who's just trying to figure out syntax. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of a funny example for this, but worth thinking about these examples as like, damn, the model is really thinking about in these ways and separating its capabilities depending on who it thinks it's modeling. Some of the things that we're doing is summarization of alignment content and then doing semantic search over a database, trying to answer questions and stuff. And there's Loom and all this stuff. And part of it is also trying to simulate alignment researchers. Maybe at some point you want to be like Paul Cristiano and Eliezer having a discussion about this thing, and you want to extract the key information that comes out of that discussion. And then you want to have some other alignment researcher provide his critique of the conversation. And then you're trying to pull out key insights from those simulations. For Cyborgism, there's 3 main projects that are going on right now, which is training people to properly sculpt the direction that we want the model to go and create generations that are the best ones. The other one is prompt libraries, so thinking about how do we add specific prompts that lead to the good outcomes that we want. And then there's generating alignment data sets, which is good for current use, but then we will further fine-tune language models in the future using these data sets. Going to quickly go over my hot takes, and then we can have a discussion. So first hot take is that language models can definitely be used for automating interpretability work. Like I mentioned earlier, if you can think about individual neurons in a neural network, like having a specific concept, you can probably figure out a way to use language models to auto-label at least some portion of the network using language models, which doesn't require as much manual labor. If you have a 100 trillion parameter model in the future, you're going to have a bad time as an alignment researcher going over each individual neuron. So we need to think about a way to actually auto-label these parts of the network. The other things is, what am I envisioning as the gigabrain ideal AI augmentation alignment setup? You have a set of alignment language models that are doing a variety of tasks. You're talking to it, and as you're talking to it, it's distilling your conversation into a good blog post. And then you have another set of language models that are providing insightful follow-up questions that other alignment researcher would ask. And then you're providing critiques to that conversation. And then you're trying to recommend papers that are good prerequisites to the kind of ideas that you have. You can have all of this running in parallel, basically. And that's kind of what I'm envisioning there. You also have a language model that is continually going in the background and being fed the information that you're reading at the same time and using that to integrate into your entire workflow and providing you new insights. Another thing is that part of the work for alignment researchers is indeed thinking about new things and new approaches or whatever. But the other thing is running experiments and then analyzing those experiments as to like, is it actually aligned or is it actually doing this thing or whatever? It's like part of the prosaic work. We can probably think of ways to use language models to automate some of that work. Last thing I'll mention here is there's a thing that I'm working on called the alignment mosaic, which is trying to serve as the entire foundation for this, which is what are the exact questions and sub-questions that we need to resolve to actually solve alignment? Basically having a direction that we can push these language models towards and integrating new pieces of insights from papers into this mosaic based on the questions that we have, and day by day etching at this entire mosaic so that we can get to the point where we've basically answered all of the questions that we need to answer. And I'm thinking about this because it allows us to be much more directed as a group effort towards solving alignment rather than being way too scattered. And also allows for new researchers to quickly plug into what are the important questions. Other thing is that to build these tools, you can't just be a software engineer to think like, oh, I know what an alignment researcher needs. And a lot of alignment researchers are not good enough software engineers to be able to build these tools. So part of the reason I'm even here is me thinking about like, well, we need to figure out how do we link up here, and then we take advantage of other people's skills and we synergize and we figure out like, okay, the reason I'm not working on building tools full time is because I know that I'm not going to build the best tools if I don't do the more ground level alignment work, because I won't know what are the things that actually lead to groundbreaking research. At the same time, I need some software engineers to be able to build out my ideas that I have in mind to make it useful for the wider alignment community.
Thank you so much, Jacques. That was a wonderful presentation, really good distillation of your thinking on this topic and what all can we make useful.
So when you're talking about the functionality of features, some of those ideas have this character where it's very straightforward or very hard. So I think you're talking about something where you're generating insights from a conversation, creating a blog post. That seems like a medium hard problem. Like it seems like it's valuable. I can see how you can build that. Other things seem like it's very simple or very, very difficult. So one would be simulating Paul Christian or Eliezer. So I can see something where you up their content and do a question ask thing over their blog posts. And also you can do a style transfer, but I don't think it's possible to simulate even strong applications of their insight. So I was wondering, what do you think is exciting or what do you think is groundbreaking here in executing these ideas?
My first claim is that it is indeed possible to simulate the alignment researchers, but let me break that down. So the first thing is it depends what you're doing. Eliezer recently put up a tweet where he was describing his view as to why is optimization such a powerful thing to think about in terms of alignment. And he was like explaining his thing, and a lot of people really didn't get it. You can use GPT-4 to literally explain what that is. And people grokked almost immediately what Eliezer was saying after taking that input. So that's just able to distill what he's saying in a way that's understandable for people. That's not simulating, right? But in the context of simulating, if you use GPT-4, it's probably not going to simulate. It's way too mode collapsed to be able to actually simulate the person. But
Can you explain what you mean by mode collapse?
yeah. So have you seen like the Jacques meme? You know what I'm talking about? Well, essentially you have two main parts of your training process for your model, right? You have the pre-training and then you have your fine-tuning. And your all HF fine-tuning, that's usually when we talk about mode collapsed. And what this means is that when you're prompting the base model, the pre-trained model, it's just trying to predict and simulate the next token. It's just trying to be like, if you give it the beginning of a Paul Christiana post, it will simulate what it thinks Paul Christiana would say in that context. But if you feed it a voice transcript of what Paul is saying, it will simulate in that setting because it's only been trained to predict the next token in that context. It's trying to simulate that specific world. But when you RLHF it, you're saying, I don't want you to just simulate any world. I want you to be good at following instructions. If you give it the beginning of a piece of blog post, it will eventually move towards trying to follow instructions again because it's been mode collapsed to be really good at following instructions. And that's what it is focused on now. It's not just trying to simulate whatever environment or whatever piece of text that you're giving it. It might continue for a bit, and then it will eventually move back towards where it was RL fine-tuned on.
I thought mode collapse is more about a very obvious degenerate behavior where it just spits out collapses and repetitive tokens. I was confused about that.
Essentially, if you want to simulate researchers, usually you're going to use the base model. We don't have the base model for GPT-4. You'll have to use one of the non-instruct models for GPT-3. People usually use the Codec 2 model. That model, if you give it the metadata of the post and the title, and then by this person, and then you just write the beginning of the post, it will start to simulate what it thinks that type of post would say. And just like keep going. But if you RLHF it into a specific mode of following instructions, it won't be as good as following that type of thing. And this is why people have been using the base models to write fiction rather than using the instruct models. When you're doing the simulation or fiction, you have to literally write out the piece of text that you want it to simulate rather than being like, oh, I want you to write a post about this thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, write a fiction story about this thing is the type of thing that you would ask an instruct model. And it will do its best at describing that type of story. But in the case of the base model, it's more being fed a beginning of a book and then just trying to simulate what it thinks will keep going forward. It's not trying to follow any instructions. It's just like, I'm in this world now and I'm going to keep going. And so the idea behind doing simulating researchers stuff is that people have already done it. I've talked to the simulators blog posts that you might find interesting that a lot of people really liked, but the core idea is that they've already simulated what other alignment researchers would say before getting the answer from the alignment researcher. They're like, oh, I'm just going to start writing about this thing and then figure out, like, let's say you write in Discord chat where you're like, I'm this person and I say this, and this other person says this, and then this alignment researcher says this, and then you don't actually include what that alignment researcher says. You just simulate what they will say.
I think I understand what you're saying. So there's a simulator post?
Simulators,
okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll probably say for the LEIzer case, that's frankly a defect in writing communication. So GPT can rewrite that. Frankly, that's a defect of the original source and not something that is like a dramatic improvement over average written English.
Yeah, but in the case of simulators or simulations, usually what we mean is not that rewriting thing.
Thanks for answering my question.
Yeah.
I had a question about differential acceleration of capabilities versus alignment research. The idea being doing a lot of thinking and a lot of cutting edge experimentation with AI assisted development and AI assisted thinking. Ideally, this would only accelerate our understanding of how to align models, not our ability to create more capable models. One idea I had was we should basically just only tell other people about new tools or new ways of using these language models if those people are working on alignment instead of capabilities. But I was wondering, is there any community infrastructure to make this more formal?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're trying to do in the cyborgism that we have.
Yeah.
Only really let in people that we think will not just go off and use it for advancing capabilities as fast as they can. One worry that I've kind of had recently is that I expect that capabilities people are probably going to end up building some of these tools on their own, because I've been reading up as much as I can about all these tools that are coming out. And I'm already seeing cases of people just going ahead. Maybe this is an example. Task-driven autonomous agent utilizing GPT-4, Pine, and LangChain for diverse applications. They're trying to use it for diverse stuff. Maybe I'm being way too naive in thinking that capabilities researchers who are the ones building these tools are not going to think about, oh, I'm going to use this to automate my capability workflow.
You think you might be a little too optimistic about capabilities researchers not catching on to this idea of...
Yeah, even if we try to hide all of this stuff, I'm getting more and more concerned that capabilities people will just build it without having any connection. What to do with this information or this thought, I'm not sure yet. But I think that the truly dangerous stuff will obviously have to be kept under wraps, and we'll just have to hope that capabilities people just don't build the same thing. But at the moment, we're just basically defaulting to not sharing it widely and keeping it within the Discord. OpenAI seems to be the case that they're trying to build these tools for automating and accelerating alignment stuff. They're working on this. I don't know where they're at exactly, but they've basically said in their alignment plan that they were going to share this with alignment researchers when it becomes useful. And I don't know when that will be, but it sounded like they were mostly going to target only sharing it with alignment researchers and trying to potentially keep it under wraps as much as they can. Obviously, OpenAI has capabilities researchers internally, so they might end up being aware of these tools and then end up using it for themselves. That's one of the worries that I have. They're already trying to build stuff like this internally for alignment work. If it ends up being quite useful for capabilities work, they will probably use it internally for
capabilities work, yeah.
And there's not much I can do to stop that. I'm probably more optimistic that if it gets to the point where we're really pre-AGI, that OpenAI will not just like, oh, we haven't solved alignment, but we're just going to do this massive training run. I think the most likely way that it ends up failing is that they do the training run and they're just not aware that it's AGI, and then they put it in the real world. And then some other people take that API and plug it into a bunch of other stuff. And then you basically kind of like what I'm pointing to here.
Yeah. As soon as possible, let's make this agentic and as capable as we possibly can and give it a goal.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if you saw the example, but there's an example on Twitter. It was like, all right, I'm just going to hook it up to my terminal and I'm just going to have it run in perpetual motion or whatever and just see what I can get out of it. And I already know some people that are using it for back end stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, you can modify my files and stuff. And one person that I know did this with GPT-3 or ChatGPT and was like, holy fuck. So they just stopped it. And things like, I'm way too scared to use GPT-4 for this.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. If there's a public API for a model that's at all capable of potentially self-improving and killing everyone, like as soon as that's available, in like one day, some random SF guy is gonna kill us all.
Yeah, it's just gonna connect it to some shit like this, but maybe more capable, interconnected on the internet. Part of this thing was like, oh, it can self-modify its goal. And it can move forward. You're just like moving really fast without thinking about anything. Anyway, so I'm a little bit optimistic that OpenAI won't just do something similar to GPT-4. Well, there's definitely going to be multiple months between the end of the training run and when they release it publicly.
Yeah.
I expect that gap to increase more and more as we get to bigger and bigger models. And so I do hope that allows us to have more time in crunch time to really evaluate the internals of the model and not just hook it up to the internet as soon as we can.
Nicole, what are you going to say?
Well, it is a good question of how does one encounter this information and trying to limit the info hazards therein.
Yes.
To your point earlier, Roman, I do know that there's kind of like Fight Club. I know of initiatives to keep information contained within small groups, but then it's also like, I don't feel that it's my place to broadly share that this is happening, but I am aware that it's happening if that helps.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. So I did a short form post a few days ago about this idea of differential acceleration between alignment research and capabilities research.
I have one as well.
You have one as well. Oh my gosh, you should share it.
I'll share it with you after.
Thanks. And so for one, I'm also a little bit optimistic because fundamentally the capabilities researchers tend to be competitive, where it's driven by from my understanding, most of it is financial incentives. And so if you're on a team and you're generating all these insights about how to create more powerful models, you're going to want to keep it internal to your team. So you have all these different teams, but with alignment, if you have a team and you discover something which is robustly just useful for alignment, you can share it with everyone else that's also an alignment researcher because we're altruistic. And so while there are many more capabilities researchers and they're directly financially incentivized to increase the capabilities of these models, they're also pitted against each other. But the entire alignment community, while smaller, can act as like a whole. And the idea that I had was the Twitter circles, where you can send a tweet and it can go to only the people that you want it to. The alignment forum could implement something like that, where you create your own personal groups of researchers that you trust, that are actually doing good work. And then you send your post and it just goes to them. And this might be the only scalable way of distributing information this way. Because if you have these, like, say the Cyborgism Discord server, okay, cool, right? It's a little gatekept, but there's like 200 people in there. If any one of them shares an important insight into the rest of the world, then we're done, right? And so I think it's a little shaky.
Yeah, 2 points. First, for the Cyborgism Discord, we're discussing trying to figure out how to even make it more security minded. The other thing, people are already sharing private Google Docs with each other, so I don't know what additionally adds to that feature in terms of
That's a good point, yeah.
alignment forum posts.
Or like integrated, like easier.
Yeah.
So if Google Docs, well, I guess that still works. And also Google, you're sharing it with Google.
Yeah, obviously that's a concern that people have.
But then if the alignment forum starts doing this, and then all the secrets for how to create AGI are like hidden in the alignment forum, then every nation state actor is going to try to hack this forum.
Well, I don't think they'll know, but yeah. I don't think they'll be like, oh, the AGI plan is stored on those servers. While I agree that there's more of a money-making incentive and orgs are already doing this, like not publishing new insights, because they, like, Demis at DeepMind has said this. It's like, there's people, state actors, pointing to places in Asia, for example, where they're just feeding off of all of these papers that are coming out and internally taking advantage of it without putting anything in. And so this kind of dynamic leads to some of these orgs wanting less and less to publish capability specific papers. And it's part of the reason why probably DeepMind isn't publishing, as they've essentially said, like, as we get closer to AGI, we're probably more and more likely going to end up in a scenario where all of the top labs are basically not going to be publishing anymore. And even if they are publishing, Sam Altman has said this recently on the Lex podcast, where the massive gains from GPT-4 are not just one specific thing. There's 100 incremental things that on their own don't provide any massive gain, but together end up providing a massive capability increase. And in this context, you end up with a lot of insider information that some of these other places don't have. And even if they did, there's a lot of intuition and stuff that these orgs have that make it harder to share that publicly. That said, people are sharing a shit ton of stuff on Twitter all the time now. It's impossible for me to keep up with all of these capability things that are coming up. And I expect by default, somebody to build some tool to make it easier to extract useful insights from capabilities papers and integrate it into their workflows, like, really quickly.
Yeah, I fully support gatekeeping information. That includes gatekeeping me from information. That's how serious I am about this kind of thing.
But for the list, I'm not too concerned about anything that's in here. So if you share this widely, I don't think it's that much of an issue.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for putting it together. I'm really excited to dive into some of these tools. Could use a productivity boost. It's not just coffee. Lots to think about in terms of an exciting future where we are learning more. I think we can probably try to wrap things up. If anybody has any burning content that they want to put out there before we leave.
Last piece of burning content. I know I've been clogging the chat with a bunch of links and stuff. I figured this is probably okay because you can filter it out. Memex Garden is a tool that you invite to your Discord server, and it takes all the papers and all the videos and things and then gives you a little dashboard to show, and you can have it summarized from Twitter and from Telegram and from Discord. And then it can summarize things and transcribe and summarize videos for you. It's really sick. I have early access to it. I actually literally had a call with the developer of it today where he showed me how to use it. And so if anyone wants to invite it to their server, just let me know.
I have a final point to make. When I started working on this stuff, I worked on it for 4 months. I scraped all the alignment content, and we were thinking about ideas of products that we could build. The issue there is that at the time, I didn't know what good alignment work was. I didn't know how to produce good ideas. I didn't know how to think about alignment. It's very different from other scientific fields because it's pre-paradigmatic. It's not the type of thing where we can do an experiment on a specific thing and then get insights and then improve on that. We don't have a super intelligent AI right now. We can only infer what's going to happen in the future. And so there's a lot of different frames that you need to think about when you're approaching these things and different types of questions that you need to ask that might not pop up in other domains of science. And the reason that I bring this up is that doing the object level work in direct alignment provides a lot of useful insights in terms of thinking about which tools or which types of AIs would be super useful. One of the questions that we asked in the survey was, if you could clone yourself 100 times, what would you have those clones of yourself do? And it's just trying to get people to think about something that wasn't possible before that may be possible in a couple of years with GPT-6 or whatever. And trying to think about how do we design these systems in a way to leverage that, but in a way that is specifically useful for solving alignment, not just generating bullshit. And so what I want is to put a call out for trying to think about how we can collaborate between alignment researchers who have these inside views of the specific problems and the things that would actually lead to progress on the problem, and people who are builders who can do things that would be greatly accelerating our work. And if you ask alignment researchers what they would want you to build, they will have no idea. But I think that over time, we can get both sides into the correct frame to thinking about how to solve language models using these tools. And over time, have a much better intuition about what we need to build. And this is why I'm doing it now and not waiting until we have GPT-6. Because as we build up intuition about what are the things that are uniquely useful, I don't just want 2x productivity. I want 10x. I want 100x. And it's how do we think about things that allow us to have major breakthroughs in the field that may be a large bet. It might not be possible, but it's the type of thing I want us to be ambitious about and think about from the very beginning so that once we do have access to these more powerful tools, we can use them in the most efficient way possible. So it's a good thing for us to start collaborating with each other. Thinking about hackathons is one thing, but maybe there are ways for us to work in tandem more frequently. So if you're excited about this or want to contribute to alignment and don't necessarily want to be an alignment researcher or want to slowly dip your toes into it, reach out and I'll try to figure out what we can do.
I would definitely love for people to connect with each other more. This is a big part of what EA is really good for. So let's operationalize that.
Thank you so much.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
You can either DM me on Twitter, which is Jacques Tibbs, or you can send me an email depending on how you want to interact. We can either talk on email or Discord or Slack.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. This has been really valuable and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Bye, guys. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.